I'm so glad to reconnect with Karen Guregian, who's a longtime columnist at the Boston Herald and, of course, covers the Patriots and has covered Tom Brady for many, many years. Hi, Karen. Thanks for being with you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Carolyn.
So, I was really struck by the simplicity of Tom Brady's retirement announcement this time around. It seemed to be very authentic, very contemplative, a real departure from the circus that was the first retirement and unretirement. What were your thoughts as you watched that video?
Well, I think he was very conscious of, the first time, and I believe he wrote something out or whatever, but obviously 40 days later he unretired. So, and I know that was kind of, we made a big deal of that. And so I think he wanted to come across as earnest as he possibly could to make people think that, you know what, this is it, I promise, kind of thing. And it was difficult for him too. I know it's difficult for him to walk away. Football is Tom Brady. So I believe him this time.
It's, we all speculate around why he might have ultimately reached the decision. Do you think he got a sense of availability from other teams and assessed the landscape and what may or may not be possible? I know a lot of people are mentioning the 49ers as a potential final landing spot for him. I mean, do you think that he already had a chance to look at what teams need and where he could go and say, you know what, there's no upside here, especially with some of the depreciation that we saw in his arm?
Yeah. Obviously I think he probably did look at the landscape, and I think, based on his situation, his home life situation with his kids now, separated from his wife, they live in Miami. He has a son who lives in New York. And I think part of, where he might have gone or ended up, he would probably prefer to stay on the East Coast. But for him, he just didn't want to play for a team and not win. Do you know what I'm saying? He needed to go to a situation that, it was almost like a ready-made deal. I think the 49ers would have been the best possibility in that light, where you could plug him in. You have a great offense, a great defense, and you're close to winning a championship. So, there were only a certain number of teams, but he'd be way out in the West Coast. He'd be close to his parents, but really far from his kids. So after all the trials and tribulations, I think he just said, you know what? Enough's enough.
And I wonder, how much of it is looking at the potential gauntlet that you would have to run if you went to the NFC and you're looking at some of the quarterbacks over there, or really across the whole league, and just thinking the path to the Super Bowl is not easy anywhere where I would be needed. Regardless, because it's all kind of hindsight now and doesn't matter. What do you think this next phase of his life is going to look like? Will he jump into the analysis work that he's been tasked to do with Fox right away? Do you think he'll take some time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, he has this huge lucrative deal with Fox to be an analyst. And I'll be interested myself if he's going to be like Troy Aikman, or might they have other things in mind where he would do something more like Peyton Manning does. I mean, there's just so many possibilities, I think, with him. So I think he'll definitely take a step back now, but I think he'll resurface by next year in some capacity. Again, whether he's going to be the game-to-game guy like Troy Aikman is, we'll see.
I wonder what some of your most memorable moments were in the locker room when he was in New England. You covered the team day in and day out, like so many other great reporters in there. I mean, is there a moment that you recall that is really special or meaningful to you?
Well, Mostly, I think mostly because it's like I literally covered every game of his from 2000 to, every single Patriot game of his. I wasn't a beat person till 2007, but I still went to the Patriot games to cover. And I think over time, there's a, change of writers and whatever, but it got to a point where after every press conference, I seemed to be the only one he would call by name. and others noticed that. How do you get the name treatment from Tom, And, but I just think it was kind of out of respect and my same longevity with him. But, I think he's always been pleasant to deal with no matter what. And it's not just with me, I think in general, with all reporters. And especially, again, given how his fame rose so much, he still always made time at his locker, if he needed a few minutes. And I always appreciated that.
So many people have tried to quantify his accomplishments and legacies, and the numbers are what they are. But as you assess the macro view of everything that he's accomplished, and I think what you just mentioned is a big part of it. I mean, to be a professional from start to finish and to make yourself available and to, for the most part, avoid any kind of scathing controversy or drama is an accomplishment in and of itself. But it seems like the thing that mattered most to him was winning, always. And I wonder how you sort of quantify the parts of his legacy that are the most important.
Well, winning for sure, because obviously 7 championships, 6 with the Patriots and a 7th with another team is, remarkable. But he just might be, people want to say he's great, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. I don't know if he's like one of the greatest winners of all time and competitors. I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is just his sustained competitiveness. You get older, you take it. No, he wanted to win just as badly at age 45 as he did at age 25. And his ability to raise the level of other players around him was amazing, but also his will to win. And I don't think any teammate ever felt that they were out of a game as long as Tom was on the sideline. I mean, they could get down 2, 3, 4 touchdowns, as we saw in the Super Bowl, and he could still bring them back. To have that kind of, and not only did his sideline know that, but the other sideline knew that as well. And to have that ability, I think, was special.
Do you think he gets enough credit for the way in which he was able to elevate the play of those around him? And we saw some of these players on Patriots rosters over the years that were recruited from really unusual places or places that we wouldn't think of a traditional powerhouse school. And we always talked about Belichick getting a lot of credit for grabbing those guys from Rutgers or wherever and making them incredible players. How much credit does he get for being accessible, as you say, and not just being a superstar quarterback that's going to come in, get his reps, I'll do my job, you do your job? I mean, there seemed to be, anytime you talk to any player who ever played with him, they have nothing but amazing things to say about the person and player that he is.
Yeah, it's amazing. He could go through 23 years, and I don't think you've ever seen or heard a bad thing ever said about him from the fraternity of football players. But I do think, in terms of his time in New England, or plenty of those teams that, either won championships or got to championships, I think the beauty of Tom in New England is he allowed Bill Belichick to, fill up or spend money in other places because he knew the offense would be handled and he didn't have to go out and necessarily get, 3 other superstars to play with him. Tom made other superstars, because he was that good. And I think you saw, certain players if they left, didn't have the same type of success with other teams or weren't quite the same as they were playing with Tom Brady. They didn't quite have the same level of success. And I'm talking about individually. Mm-hmm. But that was Tom's greatest strength, of elevating the players around him, being able to win with you and I, Carolyn. He would have won with us playing. he would have made something out of both of us somehow, so.
Yeah, well, he certainly would have made us want to win.
That's right. Yeah, somehow you and I would, we'd catch passes and, move the chains, as they say.
And they also always say Father Time is undefeated, that no matter how great you are, you're never going to win. But when I look at his legacy as well, I think about a guy who set a goal for playing till 45 and did it. Who won well past what anybody might have expected way back when he was drafted, who, seemed to be aging backwards somehow, which was fodder for everybody for so many years. I mean, in some ways, do you think he actually did beat the odds in that respect?
Oh, for sure. I think if you look at most quarterbacks over time, age does catch up to them. And again, if you can't escape in the pocket, if you can't move like if you can't protect yourself, if you can't throw, look at Peyton Manning, his final years. It was kind of sad to watch. He could barely throw the football. He won a Super Bowl not being able to throw the football. But again, you want these guys to go out more toward the top of their powers, as opposed to someone that you look at and go, oh God, that's too bad that they've gotten sunk to this level. And I think Tom was very conscious of that. His famous quote was saying, when I suck, I'll leave. Well, he didn't suck this past year, but you could see signs of his age, let's just say. So I think he just didn't want that to progress further and then have people say, well, he should have left 3 years ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So I think he's going out with the ability to still play and, again, in the right circumstance to help somebody win. And I think some people are disappointed by that because they think that he still had maybe 1-2 decent years left, depending on the situation he was in. But I have no qualms with him leaving now.
And it's his decision ultimately, and maybe that decision kind of getting taken out of his hands or losing control over that with some of the impetus to come back when it seemed all buttoned up before. We've talked so much, Karen, I won't make you go down this path too far again about his departure from New England and Belichick and Brady and who was more talented and all of this sort of stuff. But right now, as it stands, as he gets set to what we think will be a decision to truly walk away from the game, where does the New England fan base sort of stand on him, and has that wound sort of healed of him leaving the team? How does everybody sort of feel about it up there?
Yeah, well, I think it really kind of went against Belichick, when Tom shows up in Tampa and wins, without him in short order, and that was kind of an eye opener for fans because I think everyone thought it was kind of a 50-50 deal, and I do believe they are probably the best coach quarterback combination in history. But I think people realize the significance or the importance of Tom, that he could just go somewhere else, boom, and win. Whereas Belichick without Brady hasn't had exactly the most stellar record. I think people have come to realize, and maybe even Belichick, that he let him go too soon. And I think that's kind of the issue in New England. But when Tom came here last season and played with Tampa Bay, I think a lot of fences were mended internally between him and, Coach Belichick. And the team owner, Robert Kraft, was kind of in the middle of both of them. But I think, I think all three of them are in a much better place in terms of that departure. And they're able to move on. But it's still a sore spot, I think, in New England, because letting your superstar hero go and then watching him succeed somewhere else is still kind of, as I said, a sore spot in New England.
Especially a superstar hero who, as you mentioned and noted, did so much to make sure that other players could succeed or that the team could succeed kind of around him, just in terms of salary and everything else. Do you think that sting will always kind of be there for Patriots fans when they think about him winning a Super Bowl in Tampa?
Yes and no. I think if the Patriots go on and have success and win without him eventually somewhere down the road, that'll dissipate some. But again, I think some fans in New England feel like they were robbed of his final years, and he should have just been a Patriot cover to cover. I mean, when you have somebody that special, 6 championships and nobody like him, the fact you let him walk out the door is, again, as I said, it's kind of tough for some New Englanders to swallow.
And as you put his performance on the field in context with some of the other great quarterbacks that we've seen, is he the greatest of all time in your opinion?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And again, that's not to diminish Joe Montana or whoever, but, you look at championships first, 7. Nobody has 7. Nobody has 6. And he was in large way, again, responsible. It's not like he was a passenger in the car. When you bring a team back from 28-3 like he did, when you bring them back against Seattle, the Super Bowl before that, when you do the things that he's done, again, the eye test, watch, and again, his ability in other games. I mean, there was a AFC Championship game against Kansas City where there was a drive, a game winning or a game extending drive where he had to hit like three 3rd and 10s. And again, the ice water in his veins was crazy. But I would say in terms of sustained success, and again, his ability to win no matter what the circumstance elevates him to the top of the list.
We kind of took it for granted, especially the last couple of years where you would just assume that he would orchestrate these game-winning drives, which were crazy. How big of a void do you think will be left behind without him in the league?
Well, I think there'll be a void. What's interesting, I think, is also to look, Tom Brady, I don't want to say he's kind of a dinosaur of a quarterback, but the drop back passer is not quite what the NFL is about today. It's about the mobile, athletic, superstar quarterback, who can, gain 10 yards or throw for 10 yards. It's just the game has evolved. But, there's still a few of his style left, Joe Burrow being one. I just think with a premium on offense and a premium on doing what you can to, fool the defense, having that dual threat quarterback is kind of where it's gone or is still going in the NFL. Tom wasn't that, but he would still beat you his own way.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of offenses are cyclical in the league, where they always talk about how nothing is new. Everything is kind of recycled or reinvented. And it does seem like a marked change in terms of quarterback style that we're seeing now, and it might be a while, Joe Burrow's side, until we get a lot of those guys back in the league. I won't keep you for too much longer. I've kept you for too long already. But do you think because of the competitive drive that he has, how motivated he is, he will be a good analyst if he does decide to take on that Troy Aikman kind of role?
Yeah, it's hard to say. A lot of people think, he's like, he might be too nice and might not want to criticize. I mean, we'll have to see. It's hard for me to see him, knocking players or it's just hard to put him in that context because he is truly a nice guy. So we'll have to see. I mean, in terms of analyzing plays, I'm sure he'll be very good at it. But if someone deserves to be needled in some way, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure he needles his friends in private, but it's another thing to do it, on national TV. So we'll see if he has the chops for that.
I wonder if he'll channel some of that sideline aggression where you see a MacBook getting thrown or an offensive lineman getting screamed at.
Yeah, again, it'll really be interesting to see, how he fits in that. Or again, if they have something else in mind, I'm sure they want to see him every single week, given what they're paying him. But again, I could envision, not to copy Peyton Manning, but can you imagine having Tom with Julian and Danny Amendola and his boys, watching the games together? I mean, just throwing that out there.
Interesting. Well, Karen, I mean, what an incredible ride for you personally to be there every step of the way in his career throughout New England, and then also covering it from afar. It's something we've never seen and might not see again. Thank you so much for the insight. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks for having me.